First story, by Luke Smith. My name is John Smith, and for the past 5 years, I've been working as a night watchman at the old, abandoned factory on the outskirts of Woodsville, a small town in upstate New York. The factory had once been a thriving hub of activity, but now it was a crumbling relic, a shadow of its former self. My job was pretty straightforward: patrol the premises, ensure there were no break-ins or vandalism, and report any unusual activities to the local authorities. Most nights were quiet, with nothing more exciting than the eerie creaking of the old building and the distant sounds of wildlife. But one particular night, everything changed. It was a chilly autumn evening, and I had just settled into my routine rounds when I heard a faint noise coming from the factory's back entrance. I shone my flashlight in that direction and saw a group of 4 individuals wearing hooded jackets and gloves, trying to force their way inside. My heart raced as I watched them. I knew I had to call the police, but I had to be discreet. I retreated to a safe distance and dialed 911 on my cell phone, keeping my voice hushed. As I whispered the details of the situation to the dispatcher, I couldn't help but glance back at the trespassers. They were now inside the factory, and their actions were becoming increasingly disturbing. They seemed to be performing some kind of ritual. Candles were lit, strange symbols were drawn on the walls, and they chanted in a language I couldn't understand. My skin crawled as I realized this was no ordinary break-in. While I was on the phone with the dispatcher, the group suddenly stopped their ritual and turned their attention towards me. Panic set in as I quickly ended the call and retreated further into the darkness. They hadn't seen me yet, but I knew it was only a matter of time. I made my way to the factory's control room, hoping to find something that could help me defend myself if things got ugly. The room was cluttered with old machinery and dusty files. I picked up a heavy wrench, my only makeshift weapon, and tried to steady my trembling hands. As I cautiously moved through the factory, I heard the trespassers getting closer. They were muttering strange incantations, and the air seemed to grow colder with each step. The situation had taken a terrifying turn, and I was now the one being watched. I hid in the shadows as they passed by, their faces obscured by their hoodies. The leader of the group was holding a knife, and I knew they were willing to use it. I held my breath, praying they wouldn't find me. But just as they were about to walk past my hiding spot, one of them stopped and turned their head in my direction. I knew I had been discovered. My heart pounded in my chest as the hooded figure approached, knife in hand. I didn't have much of a choice. With all the strength I could muster, I swung the wrench and struck the intruder in the shoulder. They let out a scream of pain, and the others rushed to their aid. I took that moment to sprint toward the exit, not looking back until I was safely outside. The police arrived shortly after, but by then, the trespassers were gone. They searched the factory but found no trace of them. I provided a statement and described the eerie ritual I had witnessed. The officers were baffled but assured me they would investigate further. I never returned to that job after that night. The abandoned factory, once a mundane place, had become a sight of unspeakable horror. I often wonder who those trespassers were and what dark forces they were trying to summon. One thing was certain: I would never forget the chilling encounter that had unfolded in the dead of night. Second story, by Anonymous. My name is Emily Johnson, and I used to work as a security guard at a remote research facility nestled deep within the forests of northern Minnesota. The facility was isolated, surrounded by miles of dense woods, and it housed sensitive scientific experiments. My job was to ensure the safety and security of the premises during the night shift, a role I had held for nearly 3 years without incident. That was until the night I experienced something that still sends shivers down my spine. It was an unusually quiet night, and the facility's only source of light was the pale glow of the moon filtering through the trees. I was sitting at the security desk, idly flipping through a magazine, when I heard the faintest of whispers. At first, I dismissed it as the wind rustling the leaves, but then the whispers grew louder, more distinct. I strained to make out the words, my heart pounding in my chest. It was as if a group of people were huddled just outside the building, talking in hushed tones. I grabbed my flashlight and cautiously made my way to the nearest window, peering outside. To my surprise, there was no one there. The forest was silent, and there was no sign of any intruders. I tried to calm my racing heart and returned to my desk, convinced it had been my imagination playing tricks on me. But the whispers persisted, and they seemed to be coming from within the facility itself. I knew I was the only one on duty that night, and the facility was supposed to be completely empty. Fear gnawed at the edges of my mind as I followed the eerie sound, my flashlight guiding me through the dimly lit corridors. As I ventured deeper into the building, the whispers grew louder, more urgent. It was as if they were beckoning me, leading me further into the unknown. I reached a heavy steel door, which was supposed to be locked at all times. To my astonishment, it was ajar. I cautiously pushed the door open and stepped into a room filled with scientific equipment and monitors. The whispers were now deafening, a cacophony of voices that seemed to be coming from all directions. I felt a chill run down my spine as I scanned the room, searching for the source of the unsettling sounds. That's when I saw it, a flickering light on one of the monitors. It displayed a live feed from a security camera positioned deep within the forest. I watched in horror as the camera captured a figure, shrouded in darkness, moving closer to the facility. It was as if the forest itself was alive and conspiring against me. With trembling hands, I reached for the radio and called the facility's director, Dr. Anderson. I explained the strange occurrences and the bizarre feed from the security camera. He assured me he would be on his way and advised me to stay put. As I waited for Dr. Anderson's arrival, the whispers continued to echo through the building, growing more frenzied. I felt a presence closing in on me, something malevolent lurking just out of sight. The feeling of dread intensified, and I couldn't shake the sensation that I was being watched by something not of this world. When Dr. Anderson finally arrived, he immediately reviewed the security footage. His face grew pale as he watched the figure in the forest draw closer to the facility. He ordered a full lockdown of the building and called the local authorities. As we huddled in the security office, waiting for the police to arrive, the whispers outside the door grew louder and more insistent. It was as if whatever was out there was trying to break in. I clung to my flashlight, my knuckles white with fear, as the world outside descended into chaos. When the police arrived, they conducted a thorough search of the area but found no trace of the mysterious figure. The whispers had ceased, and the forest had returned to its eerie silence. Dr. Anderson explained to the authorities what we had witnessed, but they were as baffled as we were. I quit my job at the research facility shortly after that night, unable to shake the feeling that I had encountered something beyond our understanding. To this day, I can't explain the whispers or the shadowy figure in the forest, But I know one thing for sure. It was a night I'll never forget. Third story, by Anonymous. My name is Daniel Rodriguez, and I used to work as a security guard in the underground parking garage of a towering apartment complex in downtown Chicago. The job was monotonous, with long hours spent patrolling the dimly lit and cavernous underground structure. But one fateful night, the routine took a terrifying turn. It was a bitterly cold evening, and the city's bustling streets were nearly deserted. As I made my rounds, the harsh fluorescent lights overhead flickered intermittently, casting eerie shadows across the rows of parked cars. The sound of my footsteps echoed through the empty garage, creating an eerie and unsettling atmosphere. As I turned a corner, I caught sight of a figure lurking in the shadows, just beyond the reach of the flickering lights. My heart skipped a beat as I approached cautiously, my hand instinctively reaching for the flashlight at my hip. The figure seemed to be a man, hunched over and wearing a long coat that concealed his features. I called out to him, asking if he needed assistance, or if he was a resident of the building. The man didn't respond. Instead, he turned and disappeared deeper into the garage. I felt a sense of unease wash over me, but I couldn't let a potential intruder escape. I followed him, my footsteps echoing louder in the enclosed space. The man seemed to know the layout of the garage well, darting between parked cars and vanishing around corners. Each time I thought I was closing in on him, he slipped away, always just out of reach. As I continued my pursuit, a sense of dread settled in the pit of my stomach. It was as if the underground garage had become a labyrinth, and the man was leading me deeper into its depths. I radioed for backup, but all I received was static. The chase continued for what felt like an eternity. I began to lose track of time and my bearings. The man seemed to be toying with me, always staying just far enough ahead to keep me in pursuit. Panic welled up inside me as I realized that this was no ordinary trespasser. It was a calculated game of cat and mouse. Finally, I cornered the man in a dimly lit alcove at the far end of the garage. He turned to face me, and in the faint light, I could see his eyes gleaming with an unsettling malice. He was holding a knife, and a sinister grin spread across his face. I knew I had to act fast. I raised my flashlight and shone it directly into his eyes, blinding him temporarily. With adrenaline surging through my veins, I lunged forward and disarmed him, sending the knife clattering to the ground. But the man wasn't giving up that easily. He fought back ferociously, and the struggle was brutal. I could feel the searing pain of his blows, but I refused to let go. With one final push, I managed to subdue him and radio for the police, who arrived swiftly to take him into custody. As they handcuffed the man and led him away, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief mixed with lingering fear. I had narrowly escaped a potentially deadly encounter with a relentless stalker. The underground parking garage, once a mundane part of my job, had become the setting for a nightmarish ordeal. I later learned that the man had been stalking a resident of the apartment complex for weeks, and his intentions were undoubtedly sinister. I left my job as a security guard in that dimly lit underground world, haunted by the memory of that relentless pursuit and the malevolent gaze of the man I had confronted. Thank you for watching whole video. Check this video you see on the screen, it's one of my favorite. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and smash that like, to support my free and daily content for you. If you enjoyed this video, drop a comment and tell me what story got you chills.